The unexpected reunion. The night was warm in Los Angeles. The city lights glowed like stars on the ground, and the air carried a sense of excitement. Hollywood was alive, but for Keanu Reeves, the evening felt quiet inside. He walked alone, down a dimly lit street near the old studio lots, his mind full of memories. His life had been marked by both great success and heavy loss. Many saw only the actor, the star of big films, but few knew the man who often chose silence over attention, kindness over pride. As he passed a theater that once showed his earliest movies, Keanu stopped for a moment. The posters were faded, yet they pulled him back to a time long ago. It was there, years back, that he first worked closely with Sandra Bullock. Their film together had touched millions. And behind the cameras, something even deeper had grown, an understanding built not on glamour but on respect and gentle friendship. But time had passed. Hollywood was not always kind. Careers moved in different directions. They had not spoken much in years. Keanu wondered if the bond they once shared had been lost to silence. Suddenly, his phone buzzed. The name that flashed on the screen made his breath stop for a moment. It was Sandra. Her message was short. "Are you free tonight? I could use a friend." Without hesitation, Keanu replied. Minutes later, he was on his way to a quiet cafe, hidden away from the noise of the city. When he walked in, he saw her at the corner table. Sandra looked elegant but tired, her eyes carrying a weight she did not often show in public. She smiled, softly when she saw him, and for a moment it felt like no time had passed. "Keanu," she said, her voice warm but heavy with something unsaid. "Thank you for coming." He sat across from her, leaning forward. "Of course. You don't even have to ask." There was a pause, filled with the hum of soft music in the cafe. Sandra looked down at her hands as if searching for courage. Finally, she whispered, "I feel like I'm losing myself in this industry. The spotlight is bright, but sometimes it burns. Everyone sees the success, the glamour, but they don't see the loneliness. I thought I was strong enough. Lately, I'm not sure." Keanu listened quietly. His eyes carried empathy, no judgment. He knew her pain. Fame was heavy. It built walls that often trapped the heart. He remembered his own battles with grief, with loss, with days when even waking up felt too much. "You're not alone," Keanu said softly. "You don't have to carry all of this by yourself." Sandra's eyes grew moist, but she tried to hold back tears. "I just feel like people love the image, not the person." "That's not true," Keanu replied gently. "The world loves you for your kindness, for your spirit, and the people who truly matter will never forget the person behind the camera. I'm here, Sandra. I see you." His words broke through her walls. She lowered her head, a tear slipping down her cheek. For the first time in a long time, she felt safe enough to let her heart speak. But just as the moment grew tender, a noise rose from outside the cafe. A crowd had gathered. Someone had noticed them, and the whispers spread quickly. Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock sitting together again. Phones came out, flashes of cameras pierced the glass windows. Inside, Sandra stiffened. She hated when her private moments were stolen. Keanu noticed her discomfort immediately. "Do you want to leave?" he asked quietly. Sandra hesitated. Then, in a trembling voice, she said, "I don't want to run. Not anymore." Keanu gave a small smile, proud of her courage. But outside, the voices grew louder, and soon a group pushed inside the cafe. The peace was broken. Some were kind fans, but others were not. One voice cut through, sharp and cruel. "Look at them, trying to act humble. Hollywood's fakest duo." The words stung. Sandra froze, her face pale. The same doubts she had just confessed now returned with force. But Keanu stood slowly, calm, yet firm. He looked at the man who had spoken. There was no anger in his eyes, only quiet strength. "We're not pretending," Keanu said simply. "We're just human. And kindness is not an act. It's a choice." The room fell silent. The man lowered his gaze, unable to hold Keanu's steady look. Sandra stared at Keanu in awe. In that single moment he had turned pain into power, humiliation into dignity. For the first time in months, Sandra felt a spark of hope. She realized something important. Together they could face anything. And so the reunion that began with heavy hearts turned into the start of something unexpected. The world outside saw only two stars sharing a table. But inside that cafe, a friendship was being rebuilt, stronger than before, and destined to inspire millions who would one day hear their story. Whispers of doubt and sparks of strength. The next morning, Sandra woke with a heavy mind. The night at the cafe replayed again and again. She could still hear the cruel voice calling them Hollywood's fakest duo. She could still feel the flash of cameras stealing her privacy. Yet, in the middle of that chaos, she remembered Keanu's calm words. "Kindness is not an act. It's a choice." Those words echoed inside her. They comforted her, but they also challenged her. She had spent so long hiding her hurt behind smiles that she almost forgot who she was. Keanu's strength had reminded her of something she thought she had lost: the courage to be real, no matter who was watching. Meanwhile, Keanu sat alone in his modest apartment, sipping black coffee as sunlight touched the walls. Unlike many in Hollywood, he never lived in grand mansions. He preferred simple spaces, quiet mornings, and a life not blinded by luxury. But today, his peace was disturbed by a wave of messages on his phone. Photos of him and Sandra at the cafe had spread quickly across social media. Headlines called it a reunion of legends, but also carried whispers of scandal. One article was cruel, suggesting they met to revive fading careers. Another hinted at fake friendship for publicity. Keanu read the words slowly, but his heart did not race with anger. Instead, he sighed. He had faced similar storms before, and he knew how shallow the world could be when it judged from a distance. But what troubled him more was Sandra. She had always been strong, but he knew these kinds of words could wound her deeply. He picked up his phone and typed a message. "Don't let the noise define you. Meet me at the park later. We'll talk." Hours later, they walked side by side in a quiet park, hidden away from the city's rush. Sandra wore simple clothes, her hair tied back, hoping no one would notice her. Keanu, as always, looked casual in jeans and a plain shirt. Together, they blended into the ordinary world. "The comments hurt," Sandra admitted as they walked beneath the trees. "Sometimes it feels like no matter what I do, people will always tear me apart. I keep asking myself, what's the point of being kind when the world doesn't care?" Keanu stopped walking. He turned to face her, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "The world may not always see, but the person you are, the choices you make, they matter. Even if one person out there feels less alone because of your kindness, then it's worth it." Sandra's eyes softened. She wanted to believe him, but doubt lingered. "You make it sound so simple," she said quietly. "It's not simple," Keanu replied, "but it's real. Kindness is not about applause, it's about truth. It's about staying human when the world forgets to be." For a moment, silence surrounded them. Then a small voice broke it. "Excuse me," a young boy said shyly. He was holding his mother's hand, looking up at them with wide eyes. Are you Sandra Bullock?" Sandra's heart jumped. She forced a smile, unsure of what would come next. But before she could answer, the boy added, "I just wanted to say, your movie helped me when I was sick. It made me laugh when I couldn't go outside. Thank you." Tears filled Sandra's eyes. She bent down and hugged the boy gently. "Thank you for telling me that," she whispered. You have no idea how much it means to me." The boy smiled, waved, and walked away with his mother. Sandra stood frozen, her heart overwhelmed. She turned to Keanu, her voice shaking. "Did you hear that? He said my movie helped him. He remembered. Not the glamour, not the gossip. He remembered the laughter." Keanu smiled softly. "That's the truth, Sandra. That's the person they'll always remember, not the headlines." At that moment, Sandra felt a spark inside her, something she thought had been buried under years of doubt. She realized that kindness did matter. It reached hearts quietly like a flame in the dark. But just as hope returned, another storm was waiting. A group of photographers appeared from behind the park's gate, their cameras flashing without mercy. The peaceful moment shattered. "Keanu! Sandra, are you back together? Is this for publicity?" Voices shouted questions, their tone sharp and hungry. Sandra froze again, fear returning. But Keanu stepped forward, placing himself slightly in front of her, shielding her from the flashes. "Please," he said firmly but politely, "we're not here for attention. We're just people sharing a walk. Respect that." But the photographers did not stop. One of them laughed harshly. "Hollywood's kindest duo? Or Hollywood's fakest duo?" The words hit like knives. Sandra's body tensed, but before she could react, Keanu placed a calm hand on her shoulder. "Don't answer them," he whispered. "They don't deserve your peace." Together, they walked away, ignoring the shouts, refusing to let cruelty take their dignity. As they left the park, Sandra felt something shift inside her. She realized that with Keanu beside her, she was stronger. And maybe, just maybe, their story was not only about friendship, but about teaching the world that kindness could stand tall even in storms. What they didn't know was that their quiet walk, caught on camera, would soon spread everywhere. And this time it would not only bring whispers of doubt, it would also awaken millions of hearts. Storms in the spotlight the next day. Headlines. Exploded. Everywhere, on television, on social media, on gossip blogs, the same photos appeared. Keanu and Sandra walking together in the park. The pictures were framed in 1,000 different ways. Some called them Hollywood's kindest duo, praising their calmness in the face of chaos. But others painted them as attention seekers, questioning their intentions. Sandra sat in her living room, staring at the television as one channel replayed the footage again and again. The reporters' voices were sharp. Was this reunion real, or just another Hollywood game? One anchor asked. Another added, "People say they're trying to repair fading images with fake humility." Each word pierced her heart like glass. She turned off the screen, but the silence felt heavier. She pressed her hands against her face, whispering, "Why does it always have to be this way?" Meanwhile, Keanu was out in the city, walking through a small bookstore he often visited. Unlike the noise of Hollywood, the bookstore was peaceful, filled with the smell of old pages and quiet corners, but even there, he could not escape. Two strangers whispered as he passed. "That's him, right? Keanu Reeves. Did you see the news?" "Yeah. They say he and Sandra are just playing kind. But honestly, who even believes that anymore?" Keanu heard every word, but he did not let his face change. He simply smiled at the bookstore owner, bought a book, and walked out. Inside, though, he felt the sting, not for himself but for Sandra. She carried so much already, and now the world seemed determined to crush her spirit further. That evening, he drove to her house. She opened the door, her eyes tired, her voice weak. "Keanu, I don't know how much more of this I can take. They don't see me. They only see a picture they can twist." Keanu stepped inside, placing the book gently on her table. "I know," he said softly. "But remember yesterday, the boy in the park. He saw you. He didn't see a headline. He saw a person who gave him joy." Sandra sank into the couch, her hands trembling. What if I can't keep carrying this? What if I just walk away from everything? Hollywood, the cameras, all of it. Keanu sat beside her, his voice steady, his eyes full of quiet fire. You don't need to run. You need to stand. Sometimes the only way to break the lies is to keep living your truth. His words hit deep, but fear still gripped her. Then, suddenly, her phone buzzed. It was an unknown number with a message that froze her blood. You two are liars. The world will see your masks ripped away. Her face went pale. She showed the screen to Keanu. He read the words slowly, his jaw tightening. This isn't just gossip anymore, she whispered. This feels darker. Keanu placed a protective hand over hers. Don't worry, we'll face it together. Whoever is behind this, they want to break us, but they don't know that kindness is stronger than their hate. Later that night, as the city lights flickered outside, Sandra lay awake in bed, her thoughts racing. Fear tried to pull her down, but somewhere inside, a new strength stirred. She remembered Keanu's calm face, his steady voice, his choice to stand tall even when mocked, and she began to realize something powerful. Maybe their story was not just about surviving Hollywood's cruelty. Maybe it was about proving to the world and to themselves that real kindness was unshakable. But just as hope began to grow, a call came the next morning. Their publicist sounded urgent. There's a reporter who claims to have a story that could destroy both your reputations. He says he'll release it tomorrow unless you respond. Sandra's heart sank. Keanu listened quietly on the other end of the line. Let him release it, Keanu finally said. Truth does not fear lies. And maybe, just maybe, this is the moment where we show the world who we really are. Sandra took a deep breath. For the first time in weeks, she felt a flicker of courage. Not borrowed courage, but her own. Little did they know, the coming days would test them in ways neither expected. And from that test, their bond and their message to the world would only grow stronger. The storm breaks open. The sun was just rising when Sandra's phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a cruel stranger or a reporter. It was her assistant, her voice shaking through the call. Sandra? It's everywhere. The reporter released the story. Sandra's heart sank. She rushed to turn on her laptop, her fingers trembling. On the front page of dozens of sites was the headline, Hollywood's Kindest Duo or Hollywood's Biggest Act. The article claimed that Sandra and Keanu had staged their reunion to gain sympathy and revive their careers. It twisted photos, invented quotes, and painted them as liars who used kindness as a mask. Sandra covered her face with her hands, her breath uneven. Keanu. What if they believe it? What if the world turns against us? Keanu, who had come to her house early that morning, stood quietly by the window. He looked calm, but inside, his heart ached for her. People will always believe what they want to believe, but truth shines longer than lies. We can't fight this with anger, Sandra. We fight it with who we are. She looked at him, her eyes wet with fear. But what if who we are isn't? Enough? Keanu walked over, knelt down so he could look into her eyes. It is enough, because you're real, because we're real. And if we stand in silence, the lies win. But if we live with kindness, with honesty, the truth will speak louder than we ever could. Hours later, their phones wouldn't stop buzzing. Journalists wanted comments. Fans sent both love and hate. Social media was a battlefield, some defending them fiercely, others tearing them apart. Then something unexpected happened. An old video resurfaced online, behind-the-scenes footage from their first film together years ago. In it, Keanu was seen carrying heavy props for the crew, while Sandra was helping a young assistant who had spilled coffee on her script. They were not aware the camera was recording. The clip was raw, genuine, untouched by fame, and within hours it went viral. Millions shared it with captions like, "This is who they really are, not headlines, but humans." Sandra sat in her living room, watching the video on repeat. She covered her mouth, whispering, "I forgot about this. I forgot how natural it was. Just being us." Keanu smiled softly as he watched too. The world is remembering now. But as the video spread, the reporter who had written the cruel article doubled down. He appeared on television, insisting, "Don't be fooled by old videos. Hollywood knows how to play tricks. They're professionals at acting." Sandra felt the sting again. But this time, something inside her had shifted. Instead of shrinking back, she stood tall. "I don't want to hide anymore," she said firmly to Keanu. "Let's speak, not to fight them, but to share our truth." Keanu nodded with quiet pride. "Then we do it. Not a press war, not anger, just honesty." That evening, they sat, side by side in a small studio, recording a simple message for the world. There were no lights, no glamorous set, just two people facing the camera. Sandra began softly, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. "We know there are many stories about us right now, some kind, some cruel, but we want to speak in our own words. We didn't come together for attention. We came together because friendship is real, because kindness is real. And if the world doubts that, we still choose it anyway." Then Keanu added, "We don't ask you to believe headlines. We ask you to look at actions. Every day, every small moment, kindness is a choice, and we will keep choosing it, even when it's misunderstood." The video was posted online. Within hours, it spread across the world. Many hearts softened. People commented, "This feels real, not staged, not fake." But with praise also came sharper attacks. Some mocked them for being too dramatic. Others twisted their words into more lies. Still, as the night fell, Sandra felt different. She felt lighter. For the first time, she had not hidden. She had spoken with her heart. And beside her, Keanu remained calm, his steady presence reminding her that storms could rage outside, but peace could still live inside. What neither of them knew was that their message was reaching more than fans. It was touching people who had been silent, who had been bullied, who had been called fake for their own kindness. And soon, those voices would rise, changing everything in ways they could not yet imagine. The world responds the morning after their video went live. Sandra woke to the sound of her phone buzzing non-stop. Her heart pounded as she picked it up, bracing herself for more hate. But this time, the notifications were different. Messages poured in, not from critics but from ordinary people. One read, "Thank you for speaking. I was always told my kindness was weakness. Your words gave me strength." Another said, "I've been bullied for being soft-hearted. Today, I felt proud because of you both." Sandra scrolled, tears welling in her eyes. She had expected backlash, but instead, a wave of love was flowing in. Keanu, sitting across from her with his usual quiet calm, smiled gently. "You see, truth always finds its way. It may take time, but hearts recognize it." But as the hours passed, the storm of attention grew bigger than either of them had imagined. Television shows debated their video. Newspapers printed their words. Online platforms filled with both praise and doubt. Some people were inspired, others continued to mock. What stood out most, however, were the personal stories people began sharing. A teacher wrote about how she used the video to remind her students that kindness matters more than popularity. A nurse shared that she watched it during her break and felt comfort after a hard day caring for patients. Even a young actor posted that Keanu and Sandra had reminded him why he chose to pursue his dream. Not for fame, but to touch lives. Sandra. Read each story with trembling hands. Keanu, do you realize what's happening? This isn't just about us anymore. It's about everyone who ever felt invisible for being kind. Keanu nodded slowly. That's the beauty of truth. It multiplies. One flame lights another. But just when hope was growing, another twist came. The reporter who had spread the cruel article announced he would release proof that their kindness was staged. He promised to show private photos and behind-the-scenes clips to expose the act. Sandra's stomach tightened with fear. Keanu, what if he really has something? What if he twists our every moment into lies? Keanu placed a calming hand on her shoulder. Then let him. Lies are loud, but they fade. Truth is quiet, but it endures. Remember what the boy in the park said. He didn't care about headlines. He cared about how you made him feel. That's what lasts. But despite his steady voice, even Keanu felt the weight of the moment. He knew this was no longer just about gossip. It was a fight for dignity, a test of resilience. That evening, they walked together into a small charity event. It wasn't planned as a public appearance, but word quickly spread that Hollywood's kindest duo had arrived. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, but something unexpected happened. Instead of focusing on the noise, the crowd, inside the hall, rose in applause. A woman stepped forward, her voice emotional. My daughter battled cancer. During her hardest days, it was your film that gave her laughter. And it was your quiet interviews, Keanu, that reminded us that humanity still exists in Hollywood. Thank you both. The room grew silent as tears filled Sandra's eyes. She hugged the woman tightly. Keanu bowed his head respectfully. Another man stood up. I was homeless once. I'll never forget the day, Keanu, when you bought coffee for everyone in the shop, including me. I wasn't even sure who you were back then. I only knew you were kind. People need to know these stories, not the lies. Sandra looked around, overwhelmed. People weren't just clapping for them as stars, they were clapping for kindness itself. Outside, the press tried to twist the story again. But inside that hall, something greater was happening. It wasn't Hollywood anymore. It was human. Later that night, as Sandra and Keanu walked out together, she whispered, I think I'm starting to understand. Kindness isn't fragile. It's not something people can break. It's stronger than the lies. Keanu gave a small smile, and now the world is beginning to see it too. But as they reached the car, a shadow stepped out of the crowd. It was the reporter himself, his face sharp, his voice cold. You can fool the world for now, he said, but tomorrow, when my new story comes out, everyone will see the truth you're hiding. Sandra froze, her breath caught in her throat. Keanu looked at the reporter calmly, his eyes steady as stone. The only truth worth showing is kindness. Release whatever you want. You cannot erase that. The reporter sneered and walked away into the darkness. And with that, a new storm loomed on the horizon. One that would test them in ways deeper than gossip, forcing them to prove that kindness was not just words, but strength in action. The triumph of truth the next morning, the world braced itself. The reporter released his exclusive proof. Headlines screamed, Kindest duo exposed. The article showed private photos of Sandra and Keanu laughing together, sitting quietly at the cafe, walking in the park. The reporter twisted the images, claiming every gesture was rehearsed, every smile a trick, every word of kindness nothing more than a staged performance. The attack was harsh. Many readers believed it at first. Social media filled with arguments. Some accused them of being frauds, while others defended them passionately. Sandra read the words in silence, her heart heavy. She whispered, Keanu, I don't know how much more I can take. This feels endless. Keanu, sitting across from her, leaned forward. His voice was calm, almost like a whisper, but strong enough to steady her heart. Lies burn bright but short. Truth may be slow, but it never dies. Let them talk. We will. Not fight with anger. We will fight with who we are. Sandra wanted to believe, but doubt clouded her. Then, something unexpected happened. A wave of people began posting their own stories, their own memories of moments with Keanu and Sandra. A woman shared a picture of Keanu sitting on the subway, giving up his seat to her when she was pregnant. Another shared how Sandra had donated secretly to rebuild her school after a hurricane. Countless stories poured out, small, quiet acts of kindness that had never made headlines but had touched lives deeply. Soon, the hashtag #Kindest Real began to trend across the world. Sandra's phone buzzed with messages. Strangers telling her how her roles gave them hope, how her laughter healed their sadness, how her simple gestures off camera changed lives. She looked at Keanu, tears flowing down her cheeks. They're speaking for us. They're showing the truth. Keanu smiled softly. That's because truth never belonged to us alone. It belongs to everyone we've touched, and now they carry it forward. But the reporter did not give up. He appeared on live television, shouting that the stories were all made up, that Hollywood fans were blind. His voice was loud, but his anger exposed him. People began to see the bitterness behind his words, the cruelty that fueled him. And then came the final moment. A young woman stepped onto another live show. Her voice was nervous but steady. I was once an assistant on one of their film sets. I was struggling with depression. One day, Sandra noticed me crying in a corner. She didn't know me, but she sat with me, held my hand, and told me I mattered. Later, Keanu spoke to me too. He said life was hard, but kindness was a way to keep breathing. I never forgot that. I'm alive today because of them. That's no act. That's who they are. Her story silenced the noise. The world paused. Millions watched, and hearts shifted. By nightfall, the cruel article lost its power. The reporter's voice faded into irrelevance. What remained was the chorus of voices. Ordinary people, each testifying that kindness had touched them, that humility was stronger than pride, that truth was not for sale. Sandra sat with Keanu on her balcony, looking at the city lights. The air was quiet, peaceful for the first time in weeks. She turned to him, her voice soft. I was afraid the world would break me. But you showed me that kindness can't be broken. It only grows stronger. Keanu looked at her with his gentle eyes, his smile warm. You showed yourself, Sandra. I only reminded you. This wasn't my strength. It was yours, too. For a moment, silence wrapped around them. Not the heavy silence of fear, but the soft silence of peace. Then Sandra whispered, Hollywood will always talk, but maybe that doesn't matter. Maybe. What matters is how we live, how we treat people, how we keep choosing kindness, even when no one is watching. Keanu nodded. That's the only truth worth living. The stars glowed above them, the city buzzing below. But in that quiet balcony, two friends, scarred by storms, strengthened by resilience, knew they had given the world something it desperately needed, a reminder that kindness is not weakness. Humility is not fake, and love, in its purest form, is the strongest act of all. And so, the story of Hollywood's kindest duo was no longer just theirs. It belonged to everyone who carried kindness in their hearts, everyone who chose hope over hate, everyone who believed that even in a world full of noise, the softest voices could still change lives.